Presentation. I'm very happy to present here this afternoon, of course, morning at our side. Um, I have a short presentation prepared for you. This is my outline. I'll first tell more in general about behavioral insights and policy making, and I will sketch a bigger picture about the application of behavioral insight in the Netherlands. So I'll present one example. It's always nice to have an example, and I'll end with some of my conclusions. So let's start with BI and policy making. So when we look at what determines behavior, of course, I think there are two ways of looking at this. The first one is more traditionally economics, so the rational choice theory. And there people are they use all the information they can get, they weigh the pros and cons, they are very well at estimating risks. And in the end, they also end up making very well considered and consistent choices. And Richard Taylor, a Nobel Prize winner of behavioral economics, he calls these people econs. The behavioral sciences, like behavioral economics, but also social psychology, we use more the concept of bound rationality. People use all kinds of biases from the rational choice theory, and also we use heuristics to make decisions. We also have limited self-control. People are influenced by their social or physical environment, and also habitual behavior plays a role. And these he calls humans. And the thing that most of the times, the decisions we make, we are those humans, and only in a limited amount of the time, the decisions we are making, we are acting like econs. So why are behavioral insights relevant for policy making is then the next question. Well, when you think about almost all policies about behavioral change. So this makes that behavioral insights are very, very relevant for policy making. Also, when you look at the policy instruments, like for example, the legislation or providing information or financial incentives like subsidy and taxes, agreements between government and industry, for example, weak form of legislation, and of course nudging, so a minor adjustment in the choice architecture, nudging people to a certain type of behavior, but still leaving all the other choices open. All these instruments are aimed at behavioral change. What I think what my main message for this morning or this afternoon will be for you is that behavioral insights are relevant for all types of policy instruments. So nudging is definitely not the same as applying behavioral insights, only a subset of the behavioral insights movement. So how do you actually apply behavioral insights? Well, when you look at all the reports and tools that are out there, they all boil down to these four basic steps. The first one is very good problem analysis. So here you're going to think about what's the problem, but also defining the outcome. How am I going to measure the behavioral change I would like to see, the outcome variable? The second step, I think, is a very important one. This is the behavioral analysis. And here you try to understand the behavior in the context that's taking place. Of course, on the one hand, this means going into the literature and looking about already existing insights on certain types of behavior, but more importantly, go into the field, talking to the target group, observing the target group, and to see how they are perceiving the problem, what actually determines their behavior. And when all behavioral drivers are researched, then we can start to think about designing interventions. And at first, of course, this means that you are going to diversify, right? Just brainstorm and think all types of interventions. Then later on, you're going to limit your choices again, usually on criteria like the impact you already know from earlier research, but also the cost, of course, and also the scalability of your interventions as well. The final step is also an important one, I think. Ideally, also we're going to test out the interventions you want to check whether they work or not. And on the basis of the outcome of this test, you're going to learn again, then also perhaps change the intervention again, adapt, then hopefully test again. What's the added value of behavioral insights? I think the second and the fourth step is really where the difference is being made. So in the behavioral analysis, you're going to search for all the relevant behavioral drivers. And this, of course, is an important part because it makes you also able, of the chance increases of designing effective policy interventions. Of course, it is never possible to identify all relevant behavioral drivers. Context still matters, and human behavior stays difficult to predict. That's why also that this ex-ante testing of interventions is very important, because this allows you to scale up interventions that work best. The interesting thing is that actually most policies, at least in the Netherlands, are still based on these econs I mentioned before instead of humans. And it also makes clear that also politicians and their policy advisors, they are also are facing the same behavioral biases that citizens and companies are also facing. So also their habits are difficult to change. For example, the availability bias, the confirmation bias, also group reinforcement all play a role in leading to policies that are still relatively classic in a sense, that we use financial incentives or legislation without taking into account the behavioral aspects of it. So how to change the behavior of government? Well, this is my slide, a little comparable to the slide of Thomas Bredel. So what do we actually need to mainstream behavioral insights? Well, I think there are four important factors to consider here. The first one is raise awareness among staff and management. And we should understand what the added value of behavioral insights are. You can do this by giving presentations, and ideally, of course, the best way of doing so is showing results that matter to them. So where you can improve their policies and show that they can become more effective, and of course, you can raise the awareness in the best way. And a second criterion is to create a commitment to apply behavioral insights. In the end, politicians and also the top management should be willing to create time to make a behavioral analysis and also to do tests as well, to run RCTs. The third one, also already mentioned before, invest in expertise. And then I would say, especially in the beginning, invest in three types of expertise. On the one hand, behavioral insights expertise, evaluation expertise, but also policy experts as well. Especially when you're going to attract behavioral experts straight from academia, some people also know how to make policy in the team, wouldn't hurt as well. Lastly, but definitely not least, is collaborate in the government and also with external organizations. Behavioral change definitely doesn't stop at the organizational and institutional boundaries. So for example, if you want to stimulate citizens to save more energy, you also need to communicate with these citizens as well. Who are communicating with these citizens? Usually not the government, but energy companies. So you should also incorporate energy companies in your policy approach to convince citizens to actually start saving more energy. Now a little bit about the bigger picture in the Netherlands. So how did it start in the Netherlands? In 2004, the Ministry of Defense was the first one to apply the same insights I'm applying in my work, only they used it in their mission in Afghanistan. So they taught their officers also to interact with the local population without using violence and also to have effect with this. In 2009, the first report came out by the Scientific Council for Government Policy, also promoting the use of behavioral insights. And then later on, you see that the first teams are starting to appear. The first one is the Tax Authority. Then some first tools are coming out. And then 2012, a new team at the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management. And then I think 2014 was the big transition year. 3 reports came out within a period of 6 months, all claiming that behavioral insights should be used by the government. And then you see that a network is being created and also more teams are appearing as well. Then in 2015, more teams. 2017, we also published our own first update report, summarizing the results of the behavioral insights project we have run in the previous years. And then from 2018 onwards, you see more also informal behavioral insights teams being formed at different ministries and also agencies. When we look at the situation in the Netherlands, then the overall picture is that all ministries are applying behavioral insights. However, most capacity is can be found at the supervision and implementation side of the policy chain. So authorities and also implementation agencies, they usually have bigger teams than on the policy development side of the policy chain. However, I also should stress that, well, although all ministries are applying behavioral insights, the level at which they are doing this differs a lot. Last year, Joram Vijsma, he wrote his PhD thesis on the rise of the behavioral insights movement in the Netherlands. And his conclusion was that the field by and large consists of fledgling practices, yet have to formalize, mature, and gain institutional authority and influence. I think he's quite right about this. So we are starting, but we didn't mature yet. So then about the Behavioral Insights Network Netherlands. This is a collaboration between all 12 ministries, and the main purpose of the network is to share knowledge and experience about the application of behavioral insights. We have a yearly conference called the Day of Behavior. This is always held in November. This year we had 1,000 participants. We also have an online community started last year. We have about 1,400 members in it. We also have this update report twice, every 2 years. And we also have some publications as well and a monthly lunch seminar series. And we also organize courses as well. My own team was established in 2014. It's relatively small. 3 people are working there, including myself. And we apply behavioral insights throughout the entire ministry. Actually, we're also working for the Ministry of Agriculture, Food Quality and Nature as well. But then look back at those last 6 years, what can I conclude? Well, in the first couple of years, we were mostly focusing on low-hanging fruit, communication interventions. And this also was, I think, a good way to start, because these are relatively easy to do. The project duration is about 6 to 12 months. And well, we also have some nice results here now. And the proof of concept has been delivered here, and behavioral insights can definitely make communication more effective. What we're currently working on is a little bit more complex. We're looking at projects in the policy development phase. The project duration really increases quite significantly to 1 to 4 years. And we're still working on our first results here. We also try to advise, also increase the added value of our advice as well. So currently we're advising on COVID-19, and also we're advising for the next administration, which will be in place somewhere in the second half of 2021. Let me give you one example. It's one of our first projects. It is about energy saving in industry. So 1,100 industrial companies, they use quite some energy, and they signed this agreement with the government to have an energy efficiency gain of 2% on average per year. So 8% over a period of 4 years. So they joined this agreement. Then they are required to draw up an energy efficiency plan containing measures which will add up to 8% in an energy efficiency gain in 4 years. They're going to implement these measures, and every year they're required to send a progress report or progress information to our agency, and then this agency will make reports, and they will also give feedback to these companies about their progress, also give some additional tips how they can increase their energy efficiency gains even further. And the problem was that these reports, they should be downloaded from this online environment, which is also secure, and also will lead to low administrative costs when they would download it themselves. The number of downloads were staying behind. So this agency, they thought that about 40% of the reports were only downloaded, while they were working on this for a couple of months every year. So they would do a very simple letter intervention or email intervention. It was the control group, the email of the previous year, relatively long, impersonal. It also had a link to the general page of the agency, so you still needed to search for the login screen. So we made the email much more attractive and simple, also more personal, by saying, Dear Sir Janssen, for example, is one of the Dutch names. Also in the first sentence, we immediately made clear you should click on this link, and this link would also lead you to the login screen to download your report. And in the second intervention, we add one more sentence to emphasize what we thought was the most interesting part of the information, namely a sector comparison. The impact of this was quite substantial. The bad news was that only 14% was actually downloading this report in the control group. However, as you can see, it 250% increase of the number of downloads, just making the email more simple and attractive, and also have this deep link in there. It was really like a huge impact on the number of downloads. The nice thing was also the survey next to the RCT in this case. And also the survey indicated that actually next to downloading, also the follow-up behavior was the same for all groups. So that not only we're seeing more clicks here, but also the number of people indicated that they were reading or forwarding to colleagues or discussing it with colleagues or discussing with management was the same over all groups. Obviously, it was a nice result to see here. And well, if you want to read more about it, you can find it in Energy Policy, where we published our results. Let's come to the conclusions. Well, the application of behavioral insights is still an upcoming field. We left the infancy stage behind, which were not yet mature. Like I said, also in the Netherlands, most applications can still be found in the implementation and supervision phase of the policy cycle, and they're mostly communication interventions aimed at citizens or companies. that when you look at the total size of all communications, it's still relatively limited how many letters and emails are being adjusted. So, for example, one manager of this very big implementation agency responsible for all employment benefits, he said, well, we are probably sending 1,000 different types of letters every year, and perhaps only 6 has been taken care of right now using behavioral insights. So, it's still a long way to go. In order to become more mature, I think we need to apply behavioral insights also more in the policy development phase of the policy cycle. And I'm also currently working on this. So we're trying to also have more behaviorally informed and also tested financial incentives like subsidies. We also can, for example, use loss aversion in the design of the intervention. And also, of course, what I hope to do in the future is also legal interventions as well. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you so much.